Hello and welcome back to the Entertainment Vortex. Today, we were at Brennan Theaters watching Pacific Rim Uprising. And as you can tell by my shirt, I am a big fan of this franchise. I was really looking forward to this movie, and it did not disappoint. I definitely enjoyed it. Now, this is not the kind of movie you're going in to get a genius, multi-layered story. This is the kind of movie you go into, like the first one, looking for giant robots and giant monsters duking it out in wonderful special effects glory. And this movie gives you that in spades. There is a story, and it is not bad. It definitely pushes everything forward and gives you some tension to the story, but I wouldn't say that's really what draws people in. What draws people in is the giant robots and the giant monsters duking it out in wonderful action. And that's what you get a lot of in this movie. They did a good job of continuing the story of the first one, even though they don't have all the actors from the first one. They did a good job continuing that story. I was really worried about that because the first one ends pretty darn definitively, and I didn't want the second one to begin with, oh, another breach opened. Now there's a bunch of kaiju. What are we gonna do? Because that would have been just stupid. But I admit, they did a good job creating a explanation of what's happening, what adds the tension, how the world moved forward, and I like where it went. And I really hope they do another one, because obviously they've done a second one, so they've got more planned. But I hope they do another one, because I really want to see more of these characters.
As someone who was pleasantly surprised by the first Pacific Rim film, I was really excited at the opportunity to get to talk about the new installment. The original film took a genre-style film, that popcorn, entertaining type of movie that you see during the summer, and gave it the kind of novelty that only someone like Guillermo del Toro is capable of bringing to a film. Does Uprising live up to those expectations? Not entirely. Is it a bad movie? Definitely not. Like I always do, I'm going to go ahead and start with some of the positives. The action sequences for this film are a massive spectacle, and they're definitely the main reason to pay your money and sit down in a seat. They're exciting to watch, the back and forth between the Jaeger and the kaiju, and then that Jaeger battle between the two was super enticing. There's something that you see in the trailer, and it was very entertaining to watch and see the whole thing kind of play out.
John Boyega's character, who, if you've seen the trailer, plays the son of Marshall Pentecost, who is Idris Elba's character in the first one. I feel he did an amazing job. He picks up the reins really well. He's definitely not a carbon copy of his father, which I was worried about. He is his own character, which is really good. Boyega is extremely charismatic, as we know from the Star Wars movies, and I actually think he shined even brighter in this movie than he did in Force Awakens. He was really given an opportunity to be something different in this one and really show his charismatic nature. The way he one-lines with people and quips with people worked really well. Plus, he's got a really cool look to him in it, the way they dress him and his haircut and everything. He looks really badass. Plus, they let him keep his accent, and I'm a sucker for that accent. That accent is super cool. Once again, in the movie, they have pilots from every country and every race. And I really dig that because less in this movie than the first movie, they didn't really go too far into stereotypes. In the first movie, it was like every pilot from a country was the stereotype of that country. But in this movie, they didn't really do that. The characters seem like, they're younger, first of all, they're teenagers. But they seem to have their own personalities. And I definitely want to see more of the new characters in the future because they were done well. They weren't just carbon copy stereotypes. Like they were in the first movie. Each one of the pilots from each country seemed like something you would pull straight out of a stereotype from that country, which I didn't feel was necessarily insulting the way they did it in the first movie, but this is definitely the better way to do it.
The characters have very humorous dialogue. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Thor Ragnarok in the way that they kind of quip and they have one-liners going back and forth. It's entertaining in its own right. It's a little bit different than the take from the first film, but it is, like I said, it is something that does keep you engaged as someone who's there to watch the movie. John Boyega's performance is pretty solid. I like him as an actor, and I feel like he did a really great job in his role. Not necessarily what you're looking for when coming from some really great performances in the first film, but like I said, he makes it his own, and he is a really cool character, and he has some great comebacks that are just excellent. Definitely some of the better comebacks of the last, I'd say, couple of years as far as films are concerned.
You have a lot of new characters to learn. Not only do you have John Boyega's character and then the girl from the trailer, but you also have all the cadets. You have the other main pilot because Charlie Hunnam's not in this character. I didn't feel lost with any of them. It wasn't heavy-handed storytelling. You weren't getting bored learning about people's backstories, at least I wasn't. But I feel like I learned enough about these characters to care about them, especially the main few characters that were there. I didn't really get an explanation of what happened to Charlie Hunnam's character, which was kind of frustrating. I mean, he was a main character from the first one. I kind of would like to know what happened to him. But it didn't take away from the movie not knowing. It was just a personal thing. Being a fan of the first movie, I would have liked to have seen why he's not in the second movie. Who knows? Maybe he'll pop up in the third movie if this does well enough, and we'll have him back. Another person that doesn't make a cameo in it is Ron Perlman. We do not get Ron Perlman back. I'm not sure why. In the first movie they established he lived. He probably should have been in the movie. I don't know if these two just didn't agree to be in it or what, but they did not transfer in. But the people we did get did a fantastic job. So there is a character from the first movie that does come back, which is Meiko Mori, played by Rinko Kikuchi, famous Japanese actress. I liked her in the first movie. I'm glad they brought her back. And then the two scientists, Charlie Day and the other gentleman that played the two scientists, they come back as well, and they were fantastic in this movie. But I do miss the ones that weren't there, but that's not going to take away from the movie. The movie was good as a whole.
The set pieces and visual effects for this film are absolutely outstanding. Par to the previous film. They take these beautiful blue skies and they create these disastrous landscapes to go around them. Knock down skyscrapers, skeletons of old kaiju that were killed in the First War, Jaeger parts here and there. It's really enticing to see kind of how they create like a beautiful spectacle out of everything. It's definitely something that's a little bit different than some of your other films from this type of a genre, having that extra kind of panache to it, like I said, especially with like the skeletons and stuff. It's super cool.
There are aspects of this movie that I had to roll my eyes, and the reasoning is, obviously you don't go into a movie like this wanting it to be realistic. I mean, this is giant robots and giant monsters duking it out in the streets of Hong Kong and Japan. I mean, this isn't going to be anything realistic. But the movie does kind of set up their own science, and when the movie doesn't follow its own rules, that always bothers me in these types of movies. I am more than willing to suspend disbelief and just kind of ride with it in these movies, because I just want to enjoy myself, and that's the idea here. They don't have to be real, but you make your own rules, and if you don't follow your own rules, it gets frustrating to me. That's a pet peeve of mine, and there were a couple moments where there's no way the person would have survived it, or that's just not how science works, even their bent version of science. It kind of bothered me, but overall, I think the story works. It was not what I was expecting. They came a completely different direction with it, and that was super cool. Plus, we got to see something, as you saw in the trailer, that we hadn't seen before, which was Jaeger versus Jaeger, which was something very cool, and there's a twist to that, which is really neat. But we didn't see that in the first movie, and I really wanted to see, giant robot versus giant robot.
Now on to some of the negatives. This movie doesn't necessarily capture the same type of magic as the first one for me personally. The story is campy at times, and it's sometimes cliched. While it's not super out of the ordinary for this type of a movie that can kind of, take roots from older B films and that sort of a thing, sometimes you want a little bit more from your characters, you want a little bit more from your story. But like I said, it's not something that totally takes you out of it, and especially considering there's always something going on and there's always something to keep your eye on. It's not a super big negative, but it definitely is something that takes away from the viewer's experience. The kaiju in this film don't necessarily feel as inspired as the previous film. It does feel a little bit recycled. That can be a little bit troubling. They do some cool stuff later on in the film, but we don't want to dig too deep into that. But like I said, when you do see the kaiju, it's pretty much par for the course the same ones you saw before. While the things that we're talking about aren't necessarily like end-of-the-world movie killer type things, especially for early spring popcorn film type of a thing, prepping to get into that big summer release season. It can be a little bit taxing when you're watching the film, and it almost feels kind of like they took like a half step away from the originality that comes from that original film, a little bit of a half step closer to something more like Independence Day or even Transformers. Not necessarily the same thing, but definitely had like the camp and the level of humor, like I said, is kind of turned up a few notches, and it moves it a little bit closer to those types of movies.
So, if you enjoyed the first movie, this movie is going to give you more of what you enjoyed in the first movie. If you did not enjoy the first movie, I do not suggest watching this. It is more of the same, and it's made for the fans of the first movie. So, you're going to fall into one of those two categories. I am curious to know which category you fell into. Let me know in the comment section below. Were you a fan of the first Pacific Rim? Are you looking forward to seeing the new one? Or was it just not really your thing? It wasn't the kaiju movie you were looking for?
Overall, I would rate this movie a 7 out of 10. It's definitely a spectacle to see, and it's definitely something you want to see in theater. Had I been paying for a ticket, I probably would have tried to make it in for an earlier showing, maybe try to save a little bit of money, but it's definitely something you want to see on the biggest screen possible.
I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed this, and I was obviously looking forward to it based off the shirt and everything. We watched the original movie again last night, super pumped going into it. Being a fanboy of the franchise is because there were little aspects of it that kind of bothered me. Things that were written that didn't need to be, plot holes that didn't need to be there. It doesn't need to be realistic, but it should be well written, and there were a couple things that really bothered me. But overall as a movie, it's only 1 point lost because of that. All the new characters are great. I want to see more of them. I want to see more of this world. And I want to see more of this franchise. I know that our showing was pretty full, so I'm hoping that a lot of people go and see this so that they make enough money to make another one. Fingers crossed. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. Don't forget we do a minimum of 4 videos a week. Plus, we have some surprises coming up, so you don't want to miss out on that. If you're interested, we do have t-shirts available with the channel logo on it. The link is down in the description below. We hope you'll follow us into the Vortex. We'll see you next time.